From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And in Washington, Eric Sevareid, Dan Rather, Marvin Kalb, Bob Schieffer, Bruce Morton, Jed Duval in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Richard C. Hotlet at the United Nations, John Sheehan in Cairo, and Tom Fenton in Egypt.
Good evening. For about 15 hours today, the world's two nuclear giants, the United States and Russia, appeared on the threshold of military confrontation. It began suddenly and mysteriously. In the middle of the Washington night, orders went out to American forces around the world, alerting them for possible action. Thousands of fighting men were sent packing. Warships hoisted anchor and big B-52 bombers, some carrying nuclear warheads, were ready. But as suddenly as it began, the crisis atmosphere seemed to dissipate, diffused by a UN Security Council vote to set up a Middle East peacekeeping force from which the big powers would be excluded. And that was just what the doctor, Secretary of State Kissinger, demanded in a midday news conference. Late this afternoon, the State Department said the military alert still is on, but that the United States is pleased by the Security Council action. Our correspondents traced today's developments.
The president canceled plans for a news conference tonight. He now hopes to hold it tomorrow. Exact time not yet set. Shortly after that announcement this morning, the president made a point of being seen in public, walking with White House Chief of Staff General Alexander Haig to say goodbye to Secretary of State Kissinger. Throughout this exercise, the president made a point of allowing plenty of photographs, but he would say nothing of substance. He had met at least twice during the morning with Kissinger and once with congressional leaders. To the congressional leaders, the president emphasized that his military alert was precautionary but necessary.
It is only a precautionary alert, but the overwhelming emphasis is on diplomacy at this time.
Well, why is there an alert at all?
There's an alert because there is a serious situation in the Mideast, but it's precautionary.
We're right at the brink again. We're at a showdown phase. And I think very clearly, if the Soviets do go in, they're not going to leave.
A news conference at high noon. Kissinger time and again appealing to the Russians not to act unilaterally, not to send troops to the Middle East, actions that could destroy détente. Kissinger emphasized that the U.S. wanted no head-on collision with Russia.
We do not consider ourselves in a confrontation with the Soviet Union. We do not believe it is necessary at this moment to have a confrontation. In fact, we are prepared to work cooperatively towards the realization of the objectives which we have set ourselves. But cooperative action precludes unilateral action, and the President decided that it was essential that we make clear our attitude towards unilateral steps.
For a while yesterday, it appeared that the Soviets had halted their airlift of war supplies into the Middle East. But then late last night, a dozen Soviet transport planes took off from an airport in Budapest. The sudden flurry of activity led planners here to suspect that a Soviet airlift of troops might already be underway. Apparently, there were no troops aboard the planes, but those developments, coupled with the Russian threats to send troops to the Middle East, led to the alert of U.S. military forces. All American military units, including the nuclear bombers of the Strategic Air Command, were placed in an increased state of readiness. 66 B-52s based on Guam were secretly ordered to return to the United States to beef up the nuclear striking force. A third American aircraft carrier was secretly ordered to sail into the Mediterranean. Air Guard units, which make up most of the nation's air defense against bombers, were called to duty in the middle of the night. Many of those men spent a tense day as they waited by television sets for late developments. Tactical fighter squadrons whose F-4 Phantom fighter bombers could be called on to provide close air support for battlefield troops were also alerted for duty at scores of U.S. bases. Quick reaction regular force troops such as the 82nd Airborne Division were also alerted.
When these soldiers of the 82nd Airborne Division were packed and ready to leave, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger was on the radio.
Achieved in the Middle East. It called for the immediate implementation.
If they knew where they were going, none could reveal it or even how they felt. Reporters were forbidden to speak with troops or commanders. 9 hours after the alert, missile-firing vehicles, trucks, howitzers, jeeps, ammunition, and sea rations were in evidence. The actual point of departure, nearby Pope Air Force Base, was closed to cameras. but transport planes landed and took off frequently. By the end of the day, spokesman here at Fort Bragg said simply that they remain in a state of precautionary alert.
The break in the tension came in the UN Security Council chamber with a resolution to make the ceasefire stick. It not only calls once again for compliance with the ceasefire, but also enlarges the corps of UN observers to police it. In addition, it sets up immediately a new UN emergency force to consolidate the truce. The resolution specifies that this force not include personnel of the 5 nuclear powers, that is, no Russians, no Americans. Before the vote came, all eyes were on Soviet Ambassador Yakov Malik. The question in all minds, would he keep open the option of sending Soviet troops to the Middle East?
We have also studied the new version of this draft resolution, which contains a provision that the permanent members of the Security Council shall not participate with their contingents in the United Nations Armed Forces in the Middle East. My delegation will vote in favor of the revised draft resolution.
There was a sigh of relief, confirmed by the unanimous vote. This new danger of confrontation appeared to be averted. Richard C. Huttle at CBS News, United Nations.
Late this afternoon, the UN ordered about 900 men from its force on Cyprus, composed of Austrians, Finns, and Swedes, to go immediately to Egypt to oversee the ceasefire. This emergency first force will be augmented as the UN gets organized. Such is the state of things in Washington that questions were asked today as to whether this international crisis was real or had been manufactured by a beleaguered administration. And we'll look at that in a moment.
America. It's a beautiful place to visit. With Greyhound's Ameripass, you can see the country up close from sea to shining sea. The Ameripass is good for 30 days of almost unlimited travel in America and Canada for $149. An extra $50 buys 30 more days. So give America to someone special. Yourself, maybe. The Ameripass. Another change for the better from Greyhound. Take it from me, Fred McMurray.
These cats know that this sound is calling them to a delicious dinner. A little Friskies dinner. The high-protein dinner. Full of flavor. Flavor that isn't artificial. Flavor that's made from real beef liver, real chicken, real seafood. 6 delicious high-protein dinners we know will please your cat. Little Friskies. The best-tasting high-protein dry cat dinner.
Given the explanation of the provocation leading to the military alert, and given the timing of it in relation to the domestic political events of recent days, it was perhaps inevitable that the news was received with considerable skepticism, and that was readily apparent in some of the questions asked Secretary Kissinger. Again, we hear from Marvin Kalb.
There were questions, some obvious disbelief and suspicion about a possible link between the alert of American military forces and the president's political problems. Kissinger, anguished about this theme, answered a number of questions, confidently defending the president's decision and actions.
As you know, there has been some line of speculation this morning that the American alert might have been prompted as much perhaps by American domestic requirements as by the real requirements of diplomacy in the Middle East. And I wonder if you could provide some additional information on that.
Marvin, we are attempting to conduct the foreign policy of the United States with regard for what we owe not just to the electorate, but to future generations. And it is a symptom of what is happening to our country that it could even be suggested that the United States would alert its forces for domestic reasons.
Did you recommend this, or did the president initiate the military alert matter? And do you feel it's a totally rational decision?
Mr. Mollenhoff, I have a general rule not to provide a checklist of what advice I give to the president, but due to the particular implications of your remark, I may say that all of the President's senior advisors, all the members of the National Security Council, were unanimous in their recommendation as a result of a deliberation in which the President did not himself participate and which he joined only after they had formed their judgment, that the measures taken that he in fact ordered were in the essential national interest.
And I wonder if you can give us any more information that will help convince people that there's some solid basis for the actions that have been taken.
We are attempting to preserve the peace in very difficult circumstances. It is up to you, ladies and gentlemen, to determine whether this is the moment to try to create a crisis of confidence in the field of foreign policy as well. But there has to be a minimum of confidence that the senior officials of the American government are not playing with the lives of the American people.
Kissinger, who's been working a 20 to 24-hour day during this crisis, was clearly hurt by the need to separate the conduct of the administration's foreign policy from its domestic turmoil. Other officials here were in a cold fury. But clearly the problem exists in this quick crisis, and Kissinger has promised a full explanation next week. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, the State Department.
Whether Secretary of State Kissinger or any other key member of the administration could still the suspicions regarding the motivation of the alert remains to be seen. It is important in assessing this delicate question to know how decisions like this morning's alert are reached. Here's Dan Rather at the White House.
As Secretary Kissinger noted, the National Security Council considered this decision and made the recommendation to the President. The National Security Council was established to give just such advice to presidents. The NSC, not the entire council, but the top half dozen or so members, met between 11 o'clock last night and 3 this morning. Among those present included men such as the Chairman of the Military Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Kissinger, and General Haig. The White House argues strongly tonight that all of these men could not have been induced to be parties to an overreaction for domestic political purposes. Aides insist that President Nixon did indeed have solid, definite, substantive evidence that the Soviets were considering a dangerous military move on their own in the Middle East. Details and sources of the information aides say cannot yet be revealed, but they insist that history will prove it to have been correct. And anyone who suggests otherwise, they say, will be humiliated by history. The President and the men around him, frankly, are furious that anyone would suggest otherwise, and they are blunt about saying they believe the media and Nixon political opponents must bear a very heavy responsibility for what they consider to be a disservice in terms of speculation to the United States. Dan Rather, CBS News, the White House.
Eric Sevareid believes only far-out cynics would question the genuineness of today's crisis, and here is his analysis.
It must have been the shortest world crisis on record. Assuming it was a genuine crisis, and as far as the facts are known, a very short distance, we have to assume it was, it still leaves as many questions as answers. Only the President and his advisors know the exact wording of yesterday's message from Moscow, whether it was a suggestion they might or a declaration that they would send in their own forces to the Mideast or something in between. At any rate, the President took it seriously, and hardly anybody here is in a position or in a disposition to argue with that. One assumption is that the Russians had to go the extra mile, short of big power confrontation, to show good faith to their Arab clients. The Israeli forces, after all, have the military upper hand. Egypt, in particular, needs not only ceasefire, but a protector on the spot, so badly that she was willing to have the Russians back, along with Americans, even though she threw out the Russians some time ago. It's the encircled Egyptian Third Army that is, or was, at stake and at issue. There are reports, unverified, that the most sophisticated of all Russian weaponry is with that army, weaponry the Russians don't want us to get or see. As Secretary Kissinger indicated this morning, prospects for serious peace negotiations, not just a ceasefire, look promising. Israel remains in a very strong military and territorial position. The Arabs have saved their honor. Neither side can really stomach the prospect of another such war. And the Egyptians have finally agreed to direct talks in the UN resolution of Monday. If that's the essence of the overall situation, as it seems to be, then the general feeling here, even among presidential critics, will be that the Washington end of this crisis has been handled in a level-headed way. Only far-out cynics think the crisis was manufactured as an escape for Watergate. can be conjectured that the Russians took advantage of our domestic turmoil, but the condition of the battlefield was surely a far greater motivation. 3 realizations emerge from this quick, dry crisis. The American presidential system of government can't function without a president, whatever his personal credibility. The United Nations is a handy tool, and the cost to American taxpayers of this crisis will run in the billions. The direct costs and that portion of the defense budget Congress might otherwise have cut, but now very probably won't.
The U.S. alert apparently surprised Israel. Shortly after the crisis became known, Israel's foreign ministry said it knew of no Soviet troop movements toward the Middle East. Israeli intelligence indicated the Russian ships and planes on their way were part of the stepped-up arms shipments. 747 Americans were interviewed in a telephone survey taken for CBS News by Opinion Research Corporation and completed last night just before the military alert. The survey showed that 48% felt the president should resign, 39% who thought he should stay on, and 43% said they would support impeachment, while 46% said they would not. Also, only 18% agreed with Mr. Nixon's firing of Watergate prosecutor Cox. 69% disagreed. Incidentally, before the president's evening news conference was postponed, the veterans of foreign wars said they had received White House calls suggesting that their members might want to send telegrams of support after the broadcast. The National Association of Manufacturers said that the White House also said it might like to comment after the news conference.
This is an important election not only for me, but for those of you in this city.
Our candidate is confident she won't be embarrassed by loose dentures when she talks, because Orifix denture adhesive holds and keeps holding to help her speak clearly.
As for my honorable opponent, well, I'd like to make this crystal clear.
Our ingenious ingredient helps spread Orifix evenly so you get a tight seal that holds your dentures.
Thank you
Orifix helps you speak clearly without embarrassment. Use Orifix, the seal of confidence.
Stooping and bending. It's enough to give anyone a nagging backache, Alice.
Is that what's bothering you this morning? Try Doan's pills.
Doan's?
They sure help me.
When nagging backache due to overexertion or everyday stress and strain comes on, Doan's pain-relieving action often brings temporary relief and lets you get a good night's sleep.
Backache better? Woke up feeling great.
Try Doan's pills for relief of nagging backache.
Egypt today charged Israel with repeated violations of the ceasefire. Israel denied it. The Egyptians said Israeli forces surrounding Suez City on the west bank of the canal attacked today with tanks but were driven back. And Cairo also said that Israel is preparing for a full-scale attack against the Egyptian Third Army, reportedly trapped on the east bank of the Suez. We have 2 reports on the ceasefire from John Sheehan and Tom Fenton. First, Sheehan.
These scenes, filmed during the breakdown of the ceasefire, show elements of Egypt's Third Army in the Sinai. Their early advance across the Suez had been swift and successful, leaving the battlefield marked with the wreckage of Israel's American-made armaments and with Israeli dead. Egypt charges that Israel has violated the ceasefire repeatedly to expand its position on the west side of the canal and behind these forces. More battles ensued. It was the failure of the ceasefire that led Egyptian President Anwar el-Sadat to call for Soviet and American troops to enforce the truce. Israeli reports said that Egypt's Third Army has been cut off. Earlier Egyptian communiques denied that. An Egyptian spokesman acknowledged that the main supply route from Cairo to Suez has been cut by the Israelis. And UN truce observers report they could not reach Suez City at the southern tip of the canal because of continuing military action. John Sheehan, CBS News, Cairo.
The ceasefire lines between Israeli and Egyptian forces inside Egypt are still very imprecise. In most cases, they're no more than an imaginary line in the sand. The only indications that this is a ceasefire line are a few Israeli tanks. Beyond them, there's emptiness and unseen over the horizon, Egyptian tanks. 40 miles down the road from this point are the outskirts of Cairo. Up the road last night came United Nations observers to meet the Israeli forces and mark on their maps this point on the ceasefire line. The portion of the line we saw was quiet today. The soldiers manning it relaxed. It seemed like a rear area. Israeli military sources said the entire ceasefire line was equally quiet. One Israeli soldier even hung out his wash on the ceasefire line. The Israeli salient is littered with souvenirs like this MiG-21 of the air war that marked the Israeli invasion of Egypt. The deadliest Egyptian air weapons were the SAM missiles, but some, it turns out, were only paper tigers. All of the missiles in this site were wood and cardboard fakes, except the one real missile which the Israelis hit. Soldiers of the Egyptian Third Army, trapped in enclaves inside the Israeli salient, are surrendering in the hundreds. Some have not had food or drink for several days. Most of them are surrendering on the Egyptian side of the canal, and busloads of prisoners were being brought back today across the canal. At least 2 divisions of the Third Army are cut off in the Sinai. It was an indication of their plight that the Israelis reported they'd responded to a Red Cross request to provide them with blood plasma. Tom Fenton, CBS News, with Israeli forces in Egypt.
The old mill was turning out stone-ground buckwheat in pioneer days. Hearty buckwheat pancakes and maple syrup. Early settlers thrived on them. Buckwheat cereal here captures that robust taste in flakes, toasted crisp with a snap of maple flavor, and fortified with first-rate nutrition. Stone-ground buckwheat is hard to come by, but you can still get it in buckwheats. One of the true old-fashioned flavors left to enjoy.
Georgie, you are about to see the investment idea of the century.
Al.
The electric fork.
Oh, Al.
I can get you in on the ground floor.
Al, I've got my money invested in something else.
More and more people are discovering savings accounts at Savings and Loans. The return is substantial, and your money is insured up to $20,000 by an agency of the federal government.
Al, is this the same guy who invented the folding waterbed?
That's not funny, Georgie. I almost drowned.
Your Savings and Loan wants you to know how money works.
The White House is getting heavy pressure from Republicans on Capitol Hill to name a new special Watergate prosecutor. And presidential advisor Melvin Laird said today he expects this will be done. Bruce Morton has more on the story.
House Republicans told the presidential advisors, Bryce Harlow, Charles Wright, and Leonard Garment, that Mr. Nixon should appoint a new special prosecutor. Wright agreed, one congressman said, but Harlow, according to others who were there, did not. What do you mean by a free special prosecutor, Harlow asked. Would he be in a position to pick up a stiletto, walk into the president's Oval Office, and kill him? Congressman said afterward, the White House hasn't learned a thing. But Minority Leader Gerald Ford said Congress wants a prosecutor, and he thinks the president could accept one.
Well, I think that a person can be found who will feel that he has sufficient independence to carry out his responsibility. And it certainly appears to be the sentiment of the Congress that such a person be found. And I think that person and those guidelines can be worked out with the President of the United States.
Another longtime presidential defender, Watergate Committee member Edward Gurney, joined the Republican chorus.
I strongly recommend the appointment of Elliot Richardson as the new special prosecutor. There is a need for speedy action to restore confidence. It occurs that Elliot Richardson would be acceptable to both the Congress and the American people. No one is better qualified to do the job, nor held in higher regard by both Congress and the public.
It doesn't have to be Richardson, of course, but the message from congressional Republicans is clear. The tapes aren't enough. We need a special prosecutor, too. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
Assistant Attorney General Henry Peterson today asked a federal court to take custody of the records of the Special Watergate Prosecutor's Office. Peterson and officials of the special staff told Judge John Sirica that the responsibility for security of the records has been uncertain since the firing of Prosecutor Archibald Cox. The financial dealings of President Nixon's close friend and Key Biscayne neighbor, Bibi Rebozo, are back in the news. The Washington Post reported that in 1968, Rebozo and his bank accepted stolen stock as collateral for a big loan and then sold almost $100,000 worth of it after an insurance investigator had told him it was stolen. Rebozo denies this. The stock was stolen from a New York brokerage house, and some mafia figures and others have been convicted of the theft. The newspaper based its report on heretofore undisclosed court records in a civil suit.
Take a good look at your wood paneling. Looks dull and faded. Well, Scott's Liquid Gold was specially formulated for wood paneling that has been dried out by heat, air conditioning, and sunlight. It's not a cover-up, but goes down below the surface to restore and preserve the natural beauty of fine wood. Liquid Gold cleans away dirt and helps hide scratches and water stains. Remember, for best results, don't use wax after using Liquid Gold. Use Liquid Gold regularly, in aerosol or liquid.
I'm making the same great-tasting stuffing in a pan that I used to make inside chickens.
In a pan? Have you lost your bird?
I'm using Uncle Ben's Stuff and Such.
It can't be that delicious.
It is, because Uncle Ben's makes it with the same delicious ingredients I used.
Come on, you need me.
No, I don't. And I can serve Stuff and Such as a side dish with everything.
Even chicken?
Even chicken.
Things are really cooking at Uncle Ben's.
Diplomatic sources in Phnom Penh say about 40,000 North Vietnamese and Viet Cong troops have crossed into South Vietnam from Cambodia during the last few weeks. The buildup would put them in a position for possible attacks in the Mekong Delta or against the Saigon region, or it could have something to do with heavy fighting in the Pleiku area. The former U.S. ambassador to Laos is among other officials accused of profiting from the sale of excess American military goods there. The charge was leveled by two former American officials in Laos before a House subcommittee hearing. Former Ambassador G. McMurtry Godley denied the accusation, but he did acknowledge that investigators had found instances where people didn't follow the regulations to the letter. Director John Dunlop of the Cost of Living Council said today that he wants wage and price controls continued into next year, that lifting them before then would bring about unsatisfactory price increases. But Dunlop indicated it's still possible to drop some of the controls by the end of this year. Prices on the New York Stock Exchange were way off at the opening today in response to that military alert, but as the news got better, the averages finished on the plus side. Volume was 15,600,000 shares. The average price per share gained 7 cents on the New York Exchange, lost 3 cents on the American. When a policewoman arrested Michael Thomas Henson of Baltimore for using a stolen credit card in Orlando, Florida, he asked, "Is that all you've got me for?" Police started checking, and this is what they said they found, that the 18-year-old may have collected as much as $500,000 using the stolen credit card and bogus checks. And they said the bills are still coming in. Investigators added that the teenager flew around the world during his month-long spree. And that's the way it is, Thursday, October 25th, 1973. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
How long does your denture adhesive hold? This powder, Denture Grip, is designed to hold up to 10 full hours. Because you want a strong, long-lasting hold, Denture Grip is made with a plastic formula, a patented plastic formula designed to hold denture securely through eating, biting, chewing, up to 10 full hours. How long does your denture adhesive hold? Try Denture Grip. It holds up to 10 full hours.
The world we live on, filled with those things that can cause heartburn and acid indigestion. Tums. It contains one of the most effective medicines ever discovered for relieving heartburn and acid indigestion. In fact, for years, millions of people have been relying on Tums for effective relief when needed. And Tums begins to work instantly. Why not carry a roll? It's effective medicine.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Three Academy Award-winning stars lend their talents to an outstanding drama. The result, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, with Sidney Poitier, Spencer Tracy, and Katharine Hepburn. Tonight's movie on CBS.
A dramatic development in that obscenity trial in Nashville and an exclusive interview with Billy Graham coming up next on Channel 5's Eyewitness News.
And a strawberry twirl the ice milk. How could anything called ice milk taste as thick and creamy as ice cream? When it's light and lively ice milk, it's easy.
Light and lively ice milk, the ice creamy ice milk in all natural flavors.